It's day 8 of the Advent calendar, my friends. Yesterday we talked about strategic awareness, archons and sectopods, and tactical awareness. Today we'll talk about Guerrilla Tactics School, the Mutons and Berserkers, and good positioning.
The time has come to reclaim our world. Welcome back, Commander.
Incoming transmission.
Day 8, Strategy, Guerrilla Tactics School. So the Guerrilla Tactics School kind of replaces officer training, and it comes with a few nice perks from that XCOM basic facility. One, you can train rookies as a specific class here. It takes a couple days, but from my guess is you take your basic rookie and instead of taking them out on a mission and having them randomly level up, you spend 10 days turning them into a class of your choice, which is awesome, and something that is one of the second wave options that Long War enabled a bit late in the XCOM 1 modding game, but all of us were begging for it at some point. I have kind of shied away from it now because I think people use a lot of kind of gamey tactics when they can just take a whole ton of one squad in Long War, but that's another thing. So here you can also purchase permanent bonuses in exchange for your supplies. So let's take a look at each of them because they are awesome and they will have an effect on every tactical map. Vulture. Enemies drop an additional item. I think this is incredibly good because while every loot drop is going to put pressure on you to get out there and nab it, the loot drops, as far as I've seen, have been really good, and the things you can get from them are great. Bonus intel, you have to research it. Illyrium cores that lets you get other types of ammo and are probably useful for other things. And weapon mods. The weapon mods all look pretty good. There's no reason not to have a bunch of weapon mods lying around. And to have an extra chance at all of those goodies per drop, a guaranteed 2 items per drop, really good. If you're going to make the risky move to go out there and get it, it might as well be worth it. And everything we've seen them drop has been really nice. Squad size 1 and 2. Obviously these stack, giving you a max squad size of 6 in XCOM 2. And these are incredibly good for a number of reasons. For one, every tactical mission you go on you get XP for as many soldiers as you can take. So the more soldiers you're taking, the faster your whole barracks is leveling up. So squad size 2, you're getting 50% more XP spread around people. Sure, some of the XP comes from kills specifically, and other XP will come from just participating in the mission in general. But you really are just vastly increasing the amount of XP. You're also increasing the number of actions you have on the tactical map by 2 per soldier, maybe more, depending on what actions they have. How they've specialized. And that's an incredible bonus. 25-50% more actions on the map means you're going to be far more effective on your turn, as the number of enemies is going to stay the same. It's going to be whatever it's going to be. For the same reason you don't want to trigger multiple pods, because then there are more aliens ganging up on you. You want to buy squad size at the Guerrilla Tactics School, because then you are ganging up on them. It is by far and away the most powerful tactical increases you can get. Lightning Strike. That is +3 mobility for the first and second rounds while you're concealed. This basically lets you maneuver as you see fit while concealed with any of your soldiers. I think it's a really good idea for just not annoying the players. I think it's fun because you'll get to move really fast for a bit, and that's always quite nice, especially in concealment. It can kind of lure you into making moves that will have you reveal yourself, I think, if you're not careful, because if you've ever used running gun and activated an extra pod, you know that with mobility comes great responsibility. But in general, it'll just let you position yourself for the action, and it's going to be really nice, especially on missions where you have to, say, hack a console or something in a limited period of time. You want to remain concealed for those first 2 rounds, even if attempting ambush pops up, just to get closer to that in a shorter amount of time. Concealment is definitely going to be your friend for closing in on timed objectives, because without it, you're fighting, and with it, you can use your line of sight without being afraid of triggering extra squads. It's going to be especially useful for finding good positions for your rangers that will remain concealed after the rest of your pod is exposed. Not that you want to expose yourself in the first 2 turns and lose this bonus, but keep it for that ranger, but that it will let that ranger find a perfect position thanks to that extended mobility. Wet work, 25% bonus XP from kills. That's just going to help you level up faster, and you know, it's just generally nice. I can't say it gives you any strong tactical bonus, but it will let you kind of power level some soldiers if you're willing to trade off kills to them, because it means that they're going to, I mean, you could already do that, but this will increase the effectiveness of that tactic. Otherwise, you know, it's just simply good to have. More XP never hurts. Vengeance. Gain random tactical bonus when losing squad mate. So presumably these tactical bonuses are a hidden list that we don't know about. You'll have to get a feel for it. Since it requires losing a squad mate, banking on this is kind of banking on your own units dying. I'm going to say that's bad, but I'm also going to say that gaining a tactical bonus when they die, probably across the whole squad, is going to be good. So, for this particular bonus, I wouldn't plan on using it too strongly, but I would plan on getting it as insurance. Consider it combat insurance. If you're having a really easy time with the tactical missions, definitely skip it. And if you're having a really hard time, go ahead and invest. It's probably worth it. But get squad size first. Integrated warfare. Personal combat stim bonuses improved. There's no way that's bad, and it likely helps you specialize your troops even more. Equipment is for specializing your troops for specific functions, and the personal combat stims are particularly good at that. They can be used to make up for soldier weaknesses or whatever, but properly equipped soldiers will simply be much better at the job that they are doing for the squad, and increasing the personal combat stim bonuses is going to be nice. Generally, from what I've seen, these increase the raw stats of the soldier, like aim, mobility, health, maybe willpower, possibly armor, whatever. You're going to enjoy having these at all times. So integrated warfare is going to be a really nice to have, and it's going to boost your tactical power significantly. The more soldiers you bring due to squad size increases, the more personal combat stims are going to be increased in a given map. So I would say squad size first, integrated warfare second. Stay with me. Soldiers more likely to bleed out than to die instantly when they're downed. That's going to be another insurance thing. I would consider taking that first before vengeance. You may not have much choice, but stay with me is key to keeping your soldiers from being permanently destroyed. So do it. I also believe I heard someone talk about how when a soldier is downed, they will actually have a semi-permanent debuff that they'll have to work off by going on a combat mission with this debuff in place to kind of get themselves back in the game. And I really like that compared to the permanent will decrease that we suffered in XCOM Enemy Unknown. So then the last 4 things you can purchase in the Guerrilla Tactics School are class-specific upgrades. For the Grenadier, bigger booms, their explosives will be able to crit once you've researched this. That is awesome because if you think about it, explosives, I'm going to guess explosives are going to be cover agnostic. that they're just going to have a flat crit percentage, and because they destroy cover. Using an explosive against someone who's exposed as opposed to someone whose cover it's going to destroy seems like the same thing to me. So I could be wrong, but I would guess that explosive will have a flat crit percent, and since you can hit multiple targets with it, your chance of getting one or more crits increases dramatically the more people you have in explosion. And with every explosion, the goal is to include as many enemies as possible. So that's going to be an unpredictable but probably impressive increase in damage. Plus, of course, it shreds so many good things. That's a really nice to have, but I wouldn't count on it making huge differences predictably. The Rangers is Hunter's Instinct. Attacks against flanked enemies deal +3 damage. That is going to be awesome. It's going to be yet another reason to use Rangers. Now, this can tempt you to send Rangers too far forward and try and flank people, which generally puts them in horrible positions, as we talked about before. What it's best going to be used for is finishing off lone enemies or enemies that have outstripped their fellows and are threatening to flank you or have flanked you. And it's going to be yet another reason that concealed scouts are going to be awesome for assassinating Lord knows what. But +3 damage is a huge bonus, and you're going to want to preserve your ability to use that as often as possible. And it's not going to be too hard to use when circumstances are safe and there aren't too many enemies around. It's going to be really hard to use when there are lots of enemies around and you're in a big stand-up fight. Sharpshooters, they gain Deadshot, a +10% crit chance. So this is a solid bonus, like the Grenadier, not terribly predictable, but when it works, it's going to be awesome. It's especially nice with the pistol user because they get more attacks, and the more attacks you have, the better any particular aim or crit bonus is going to be worth across all attacks. So probably better for the pistolier sharpshooters, but then again, the crit chance, it may just simply guarantee a critical hit with the specialized abilities of the long distance sniper. Specialist, cool under pressure, +10 aim and can crit while overwatching. This is going to be awesome. There are so many times when you want to overwatch, and with a specialist's ability to hack and still have an action left, they'll be able to hack and then go into overwatch. Extra aim when overwatching is really nice because often you're firing at enemies that either are outside of the cover they want and therefore pretty exposed because they lack the defense of the cover, which is how they normally fight, or it's going to be against enemies that never use cover and therefore are fairly hard to hit no matter what they're doing. So that 10 aim is going to help. In one situation, you're kind of dominating on an enemy's weakness, and the other one, you're kind of chipping away at their strength. So that aim is going to be excellent. And the ability to critical hit while overwatching, if you ever, like, as a modder of Long War, I found that Opportunist was one of the most horrifically overpowered traits ever. If you ever played Long War and went for the Overwatch infantry builds, they were insane. You could just tear people up thanks to Opportunist. That is the most restricted perk in my personal mod. Since I got onto the topic of Long War, let me say that the Long War 1.0 mod was just released like a couple weeks ago, and it's both a sad and a happy event. I love that they finally took it out of beta, that they wrapped it up, that they exposed the air war statistics to modding in the files. And it's sad to see Johnny and Amanari company go, but I'm really happy to see that they are going to be producing their own games. Terra Invictus, if I remember correctly, is the working title. And it's just awesome to see a game design company be born from the skill and passion that it took to create the Long War mod. an exceptional mod. My mod is built on top of it, and upgrading my mod to interact with that 1.0 version was a little touching. So that's Guerrilla Tactics and a little blurb about Long War. We're going to move on to the next section.
Incoming transmission.
Day 8, Tactics, Mutons, and Berserkers. So Mutons and Berserkers, classically the foot soldiers of the alien invasion. So you can expect a step up from the Advent, which are kind of going to be, probably the Advent are modeled after the eventual role that the Mutons will fill. The Berserkers, you can see them in the Shock Lancers. The Mutons, you can see them in the Troopers, probably the Captains, and the Mechs, all combined. So, the Mutons are famous for being the most potent foot soldiers of the aliens, and as biological enemies, they'll be immune to hacking and a step up in the alien game. Probably they'll be able to inspire themselves. In XCOM, they could induce panic in your soldiers when they were hit as a passive reaction, which was brutal when you're on the wrong side of that. And you can expect them in general to act more like your own units than the Advent do, because they'll have more options available to them. The Mutons themselves, just the Muton troopers, are going to be tough infantry with strong ranged and melee attacks. They'll likely have grenades. They'll likely intimidate you in some way, possibly when hit. And they'll probably be able to self-buff themselves. So in that regard, they're kind of like one of the Advent mechs combined with one of the Advent captains is what I would expect from them. In previous iterations of XCOM, they were weak to mental effects, to psi effects, but I wouldn't guarantee that here. Still, it's worth a shot. So you can expect them to have a lot of the advantages you do when fighting. They're going to be difficult to fight when they're in cover and not flanked. And you can expect them to have pretty improved raw stats over the troopers you've been fighting. They'll be tough, they'll have decent aim, they'll have decent damage, and of course their grenades are going to wreck you if you're not careful. You're going to be able to counter them then with debuffs, particularly psi debuffs, even if they're not weak against psionic effects. Debuffs are going to take away their main strength, which are going to be their raw stats. Cover destruction is going to expose them, and because they're cover using enemies, that's going to be incredibly deadly and allow you to counteract that hardiness. And engaging at medium or longer range is going to keep you safe from those grenades. So I would stick to debuffs, cover destruction, and engaging from a safe distance to take out the Muton troopers. However, you may have other things to worry about. Muton Berserkers are really deadly. Incredibly tough melee units with deadly melee capabilities and often an intimidating field presence, whether that's in the form of buffs or simply charging towards you. You can expect incredible aggression from these guys. Whatever Shock Lancers do times 2, maybe 3. And it seems likely that they'll have panic-inducing effects, probably unconsciousness-inducing attacks. And getting nailed by one could be instant death for soldiers that aren't particularly tough or built to withstand it. So how do you deal with these things? Because generally when one comes onto the field, you have to focus on it and ignore everything else. Well, anything you have to focus on and ignore other enemies, the best thing you can do is move away from the other enemies and concentrate fire on the one that is threatening you the most. So a fighting withdrawal is going to be the best solution. You want to move back out of its range, keep popping shots at it from a safe distance, and slowly work it down. If you can reduce its mobility, possibly through like a flashbang effect, which it may or may not be immune to, anything like that, maybe a psionic effect, that's going to help out a ton, which will allow you to maybe even stand your ground, since that effectively is outside of its range if you can reduce its mobility. And you can expect concentrated fire to work. Now, in the original XCOM Enemy Unknown, Berserkers moved closer to you whenever you fired, and you could kind of drag them whichever way you chose if you were savvy, so as to keep them away from some people or pull them into other automatic attacks. That's likely to kind of work again here, but you're just going to want to be aware, especially aware of any of the special abilities these things have, because one slip up and someone's going down. So that's it for Mutons and Berserkers. Let's move on. Day 8, Disposition, Good Positioning. Positioning grants you a couple things: defense, line of sight, height advantage, flanking potential, and engagement range. And we're going to go over each of these, and then we're going to go over them in a number of scenarios and which ones you should consider most important in those circumstances. First off, defense. Cover. Cover provides defense. There's low cover, there's high cover. And then there's concealment, which is basically perfect defense, untargetable from certain directions. Heavy cover is the best. You always want heavy cover if possible, and if you can't get it or an equivalent, then you should strongly consider not ever moving to that position unless there are very few enemies and you're about to overwhelm them. If there are going to be no enemies at the end of the turn, it doesn't matter. Line of sight. Whether there are enemies on the board or not, you're going to want to control your line of sight unless you're absolutely sure the map is completely free of enemies. Line of sight is important after every skirmish because it could mean getting into the next skirmish immediately before you have a chance to reload and reposition, or not. Height advantage is, I suspect it's a 20% aim bonus, which is excellent, and you always want that whenever you can get it, making roofs a powerful combat position to hold, though often they come with the trade-off of low cover. Flanking. So this is going to be enemy dependent. Not all enemies can be flanked, but the ones that can, when you can flank an enemy, you're going to gain a massive critical bonus chance, and they're going to lose the defense they had from cover, which generally any enemy that takes cover absolutely needs the defense that cover provides to survive on the battlefield. So it's going to be incredibly good positioning for you to flank an enemy. The problem with flanking is you often open yourself up to be flanked or caught out of position, or open up your own line of sight by moving forward around the enemy, since whichever direction you contact the enemy in is going to be forward, and risk triggering extra pods that will then flank you. So flanking, one of the riskiest and best moves you can make. Lastly, engagement range, also enemy dependent. You're going to want to know at what range you want to engage enemies. Generally, if they have powerful instantaneous AoE effects like grenades and rockets, you're going to want to be further back in case they use them, destroy your cover. That can protect you simply through distance from the nastiness they're planning, and often they can't use them at extreme ranges, so you want to fight them from a long way away and then kill them without ever letting them use that ability. So when you are moving into the unknown, heavy cover in the direction that you moved is going to be your best bet. And that is what you do every time you move, basically. If there are no enemies on the board, then assume that when you move, you're going to trigger more enemies, and whichever direction you're revealing enemies in is going to be the best position to take cover against. Line of sight. This could be more important than heavy cover when moving, but you don't always have the ability to control your line of sight. However, when you do, you want to not reveal new areas of the map as much as possible. If you can move up against an unopened door, that's against a wall and you can't see through the wall, that's perfect because you get closer to the enemy squad for a great ambush position, and the rest of your squad can move up, and then when you trigger that enemy, you'll have all your actions. You'll be in a great position to just blow them away as fast as possible. You may also open that door and find something really awful you can't kill in one turn and have to run away, but at least you have all of your actions. If you don't control your line of sight, you're going to get sloppy. You're going to trigger an extra pod halfway through your actions. You're not going to be able to react properly with all of your squads repositioning to heavy cover and not into positions where they could be flanked, and you're going to get screwed. So just remember that flanking isn't a consideration at all. Engagement range is going to be unknown, and height advantage, if you're at the edge of a roof, is likely going to come with contact. So don't try and take height advantage against an area until you're ready to pick a fight. So when you're already in combat, what constitutes good positioning? The most important consideration when in combat is engagement range against the threats that do exist. If there is a no-go zone, like the Shin attack that the Sectopod has, you don't want to be anywhere where it can trigger that and hit multiple people, then you must make all of your positioning considerations around that circumstance. So engagement range, #1 most important thing ever. The more deadly the creature is, generally the further away from it you want to be. Unless you're going for a blitzkrieg kill and you're going to wrap it up. But that's usually how you lose a ranger. Your line of sight should be frozen when you're in combat. You should never look into unexplored territory unless you have a good idea that there are no enemies to be found there. And that's a call that experienced commanders can make, and inexperienced ones will make and lose soldiers too. Just to keep the status quo the same, just freeze your line of sight. It's not like you're going to reveal an extra soldier who's going to help you if you move in unknown territory, so just don't risk it unless you're absolutely sure you know what you're doing. And height advantage, defense, and flanking, these should all be considered based on what your soldier's good at and what your enemy's good at. Generally, at the beginning of a firefight, you should avoid trying to flank. You should stick to good defense and stick to height advantage if you can. But don't go out of your way to get height advantage or flanking in exchange for defense when everyone is still at full health and has all their abilities. Once the firefight is dragged on and you're ready to mop up, moving into flanking positions is a good move, as long as you aren't showing too much enemy territory. If you've pulled back a little bit, then the mop-up effort becomes much less risky because you can then advance into territory you've already seen, and there probably aren't new enemies that have moved into. So that's significantly safer to just pull back at the beginning of every firefight at least a little bit. So when fighting withdrawal, I suggest considering fighting withdrawal at every combat round, every time. When you pull back and use Overwatch, you force enemies to come to you and get shot up while they're out of cover. You can pick better positioning when you pull back than when you're pushing forward, unless you have a really good idea where the enemy is and a really good idea of what the cover is everyone will have. You can often lure the enemy into poor cover themselves. And your line of sight is shrinking instead of expanding, so you're actually reducing the risk of encountering multiple pods when you pull back. So I suggest pulling back, say, 5 or 6 squares almost every time you engage, unless you are forced to go after something because it's mind controlling one of your soldiers and you need it dead, or you absolutely want to land a grenade. But know that that carries a little more risk than the slight step back. And when you're pulling back, flanking is going to be almost impossible as long as you're moving backwards, because the enemy is also going to get to pick their cover, and they're going to be fighting at extreme ranges where flanking just isn't reasonable. So when breaching a door or a room, the less windows it has, the less outlets for view, line of sight, the better. assuming you can take whatever's on the other side. When you open that door, make sure to have as many of your actions left as possible, and if you're completely out of combat when you see a door that you're going to go through, move all of your units up to it as close as you can. Preferably still in cover. There may be some enemies that can attack as soon as they're revealed, but you're going to want to have all of your actions available to react to whatever's on the side of the door. And if the range is super close, then you may be able to take advantage of multiple flanking attacks to really just slice down the enemies, or powerful grenade shots, or powerful Overwatch abilities. The Grenadier can get up to, I think, 3 Overwatch shots with their minigun, but committing to Overwatch means that they can't react in any other way to whatever's on the other side of the door. If you open the door and see a gatekeeper and it eats your Overwatch, still has 3/4 of its health, and is going to like bomb you, then you made a poor choice. So I highly suggest that if you're going to open a door, nobody be committed to any other actions just yet, so that you can make exactly the right and think of exactly the right answer to the situation you find yourself in. It's especially nice because you can pull back a significant distance, and they have to come out through the door most likely. An interesting tactic is to position a unit with squad sight, one of your sharpshooters, far away with a good line of sight through that door, and put them on Overwatch, because they're probably going to be safe. So they can commit to that Overwatch without risking being annihilated due to the just extreme range they can be at. And that can give you a nice hit against enemies that would normally be in cover, while still allowing your units that are close and in those risky positions to figure out what they're going to do. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to positioning is concealed scouts. So if your rangers remain concealed after the rest of the squad triggers, where do you want to put them? Since their line of sight won't trigger new pods, you're going to want to use them to identify where these new pods are and position the rest of your squad in a smart manner so as to avoid triggering too many pods at once while they work down the enemies that they are dealing with. And that means maintaining generally long range from any active combat units and any of the other pods. But the pods that haven't activated yet appear to be quite slow, so you can probably stick around. You can probably keep a really good eye on them. You're going to want to be forward from your squad, that is further in the direction of your latest contact, and probably flanking it off to the left or right so that you get a good view of what's behind them. This does mean that you're not going to be able to see the other side, but battle scanners can be used in exactly this manner. Wherever you're going to put your concealed scout is also a great place to put a battle scanner, or vice versa. Wherever you would throw a battle scanner probably would be a good place for a concealed scout, as long as it's not right on top of an enemy position. So that's it for good positioning. Thanks for joining me for day 8. Alright friends, that's it for day 8. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and like this video. If you'd like to see the next Advent Calendar video as soon as it comes out, please subscribe to my channel. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about equipment and loadouts, Andromedons and Ethereals, and worst case scenarios.